This is an oral history with Bob DeGrazio, and it's for the Carnegie Library Oral History Project and the Rocky Flats Cold War Museum. And today's date is September 30th, 2004, and we're meeting in Bob DeGrazio's house, and his wife is also present. So, Bob, as I said, my first question is, when and where were you born?
I was born in Salida, Colorado, July 30th, 1927.
And could you tell me something about your family and where you
Yeah,
came from?
I have one brother who's deceased now, and two sisters, one of which is deceased, and myself. It was four children in the family. Both parents are deceased, and Salida, Colorado was a very nice town to grow up in. Had 5,000 people. Everybody knew everybody else, and everybody trusted everybody else, and it was enjoyable. Went to high school there. After high school, joined the Navy. This was in 1945. I stayed in the Navy a little over 2 years. I was a radioman third class. After a stint in the Navy, went to University of Denver, where I met my wife Stella 52 years ago. Got married in 1952. After graduation, I majored in chemistry. Loved chemistry. I always loved chemistry. In fact, when I was still in high school, I was teaching budding nurses basic chemistry. And I enjoyed that. I still do. But
so you liked science and chemistry
oh, yeah.
in high school?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think when I was 10 or 12 years old, my mom gave me a chemistry set for Christmas. And by golly, that stuck. I just enjoyed it. And I still do, after all these years. And after working at Rocky Flats in chemistry for 38 years. And another 4 years in the University of Denver.
Now, when you were in the service, what did you do in the service?
I was a radioman aboard a PBY and a JD, they call it JD aircraft.
And where were you stationed?
Mostly in Barbers Point, Hawaii. Our main duty there, it was toward the end of the war, and our main duty there was to fly drones and sleeves, what they're called, for the fighter pilots to practice shooting down all over, in Hawaii, over the ocean there. And boy, I still remember that a lot of times those fighter pilots came too close to our aircraft and almost shot us down. And the radio department on a PBY, that's a seaplane, was way in the tail, and it got hot, and it got muggy, and it got seasick all the time, and it was hard to operate the Morse code telegraph and radio equipment. Lots of times I had to bring a bag with us. Just these pilots, the pilots of PBY, the JDs, that's how they got their flying time in. And they were sort of cocky, and they dipped and swerved, and they went through the white caps, and the poor radio man, me, got sicker than a dog back there most of the time because they had to show off how good pilots they were. And that's good. That's good. Looking back, that's good, because they're the ones that had to defend the island.
Did you enjoy your time in the service, or were you?
I did.
glad to get out?
No, I enjoyed it. I mean, as much as you can. I enjoyed it because I knew once we got out, once I was discharged, Uncle Sam would pay for college, the GI Bill of Rights. And they did, all 4 years, more than 4 years. I'm not sure they have that today or not.
It's not.
But this was back in Started college in 1948 and graduated in 52. That's where I met Stella.
And that was at the University of Denver?
Yeah, in Denver, yeah.
And you majored in chemistry?
Chemistry, physics, and math, yeah. The science, majored in chemistry, minored in physics and mathematics, which all go together. We always had a fight with, not a fight, but arguments with the physicists. They thought they were the king of the hill, and we thought the chemists were the king of the hill, and there was always a conflict there. A nice conflict, but a conflict. Even at Rocky Flats, the physicists there, the engineers, you chemists, what do you know about anything?
How would you characterize the difference between chemists and physicists?
Well, a chemist deals with mostly solutions and liquids and chemicals, and whereas a physicist will deal mostly on the physical things like light and electromagnetic waves and magnetism and stuff like that. But lots of times we had to exchange information. The chemist had to give the physicist information, and vice versa. So we worked together. And that's another thing you don't see today, is teamwork. At least my kids tell me that. Teamwork is, it doesn't exist like it did in the days when I was working.
So now you graduated from University of Denver, and then was your first job at Rocky Flats?
My first and only job. I remember one of the officials from Rocky Flats came and interviewed chemistry students at DU, and I was hired 6 months before I graduated, because at that time they were just building up Rocky Flats.
Right. It was just starting.
Just starting, yeah. They started in 51, and the interview was in 52. So John Epp, I remember him like it was yesterday, 60 years ago? He came and says, yeah, you got a pretty good record here, and we would like to hire you. But I told him, see, I got 6 months to go. He says, all right. So I can't remember whether they put me on the payroll or not then. I don't think so. But anyway, as soon as I graduated, I was hired, and still Rocky Flats was being built up. And they didn't know what to...
Did you have to go through the security?
Oh,
clearance?
yeah, it's called a Q clearance. Oh, yeah, yeah. The security was pretty strict. Anyway, I passed the security and graduated, and then Mr. Epp said, well, we don't have a building for you ready yet, so they sent us to Oak Ridge for about 6 months. And we did a lot of training there. Their laboratories were, long time there, so... And the first thing I remember, that's where we got married.
Oh, at Oak Ridge.
Yeah, we went to Oak Ridge and got married there at was it Garden City? Not Garden City. I can't remember now. Anyway, we got married there, and I worked at Y12 laboratory, big laboratory there. And I remember Patty Page, the singing rage. That was my favorite singer at that time. I remember she was made famous, the little doggy in the window. And the other one I loved was, I can't remember now.
So you were at Oak Ridge for 6 months.
About 6 months, yeah.
And
then we went back to Rocky Flats, and still our building. At that time, the building was 81 building, and that wasn't ready. That was a huge building. So they put us in a garage. That was lots of fun. They put us in a garage, and it was the west part of the plant site there. And at Rocky Flats, the wind blows from the west pretty hard. And that garage, so-called garage, was made of tin. And the thing would rattle and shake, and we thought, man, we're not going to last long here. We're trying to do our titration and experiments in the garage. It was useless. It was lots of fun, though.
And what was it all, were most of the other people like yourself, just young and just out of college?
Oh yeah. We got along real fine. They were the same age and straight out of college and eager to save the world, which I think we did. I think Rocky Flats really did. The escalation was really serious, and we found out real quick how serious the Cold War was. Russia was very wanted to down this country, and Rocky Flats was one of the installations that had to see that they didn't, and that's where the escalation came in, the so-called Cold War. And it was a Cold War because we saw what the Russians were doing. This was all secret stuff, and we saw what the Russians were really up to, and they were up to no good at all.
Were you given more information, do you think, about what the Russians were doing than the average citizen?
Oh, the average citizen really didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
They really didn't know. I can see why. She didn't know, and I couldn't tell her. And it was scary. So we really put our heart into it. At the same time, we were really criticized. We were called murderers, and
That was later, after the protesters.
Yeah, all the protesting. I can still remember the blue nuns coming out there and protesting, and the hippies from Boulder protesting, and the people from Tibet with their drums walking up from Boulder to Rocky Flats protesting, and we really weren't liked at all.
But wasn't that later? I mean, weren't there a number of years where it wasn't like that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, most of the time it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
Because it was a secret plant. And I had to laugh because a lot of people thought we made insecticides out there. I said, oh, yeah, we make insecticides, yeah. No, you're right. Most of the time it wasn't like that. It was after people began to realize that we were making nuclear triggers and stuff like that.
Yeah. Now, earlier on, was it hard for you not to be able to talk to your wife about what you were doing?
Not really, because most of it was chemistry, and unless you're a chemist or have a scientific background, it didn't mean too much. I told her a lot of stuff that was non-classified. I told her one time I got contaminated with tritium, which is a radioactive gas. And
how did that happen?
Well, that happened. Somebody brought a sample into the lab one time and said, "Don't know what this says. I'd like to have you guys analyze it." Sure. I said, "Don't you really know where it came from?" No, they think it's water, but we got to make sure what it is. And I was the guy that did the analysis, and I got one tiny drop, one speck of drop of that stuff on my finger, accidentally. And then after we analyzed the stuff, we found out it was heavy water, with tritium, which is radioactive. And man, I got contaminated bad, but luckily, tritium has a half-life of 26 days. So they said, drink a lot of beer and excrete it, and you'll be okay in 26 days. But she wouldn't let me in the bedroom for 26 days.
Is that right?
That's right. And
so
then
you really did have to just drink alcohol?
No, beer. They said drink beer.
Beer?
I didn't like beer, so I just had, just water or iced tea or, to flush it out of the system.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But plutonium contamination is a different story. If I'm on the wrong track, you'd let me know.
No, I think this is very interesting. Then the tritium, so you did identify that it was tritium.
Yeah, and not only that, but in the analysis, that we did in our lab, went up the stack and got the whole plant site. I don't think this is classified. Got the whole plant site contaminated. Not much, but at Mound Laboratory, you know, we brought in some experts, tritium experts, tritium chemists, and after we told them what our problem was, they laughed. You know, what are you worried about a little bit of tritium when our whole plant at Mound Laboratory in Ohio, there's a green cloud up there all the time, and that's tritium. They didn't understand that our specifications here in Colorado were different at the other, they called AEC lab in those days.
And you weren't supposed to have tritium here, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. They came from Hanford in Washington, and they didn't tell us that this particular part was contaminated with tritium. So when we dissolved the part.
So it came in on a part.
Yeah.
I see. And wasn't there some kind of some difficulty with people from the outside when they discovered there was tritium?
Oh yeah, that's the newspapers really had a ball, really a ball. In fact, it was national news that Rocky Flats contaminated Denver, Broomfield, and the surrounding cities. In a sense, that was true. In a sense.
And that was the same occasion that you got contaminated?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was accidentally brought in, or do you know?
Well, who knows? Who knows? But see, all these parts, I call them parts. They were parts from Hanford. They were supposed to be. They work with tritium, and they were supposed to test the part first before they sent them to us. And apparently, this one just one part, they didn't. They got through the crack. And you know, it's, to us, it was really serious. To the tritium experts from Mound Laboratory, it was a big joke. But it didn't become a big joke after they started reading the newspapers and talking to the governor and talking to you know, the health department. Then they realized.
Yeah. Now, was that a difficult time for you? You know, first of all, you were contaminated, and then was your lab under scrutiny, or?
Oh yeah, we had the lab was completely shut down, and we brought in decon workers, decontamination workers, and everything was discarded and put in barrels and shipped out, and new equipment brought in. We had to recalibrate everything, and we had to answer, you know, well, I don't. People who aren't in the know don't know how to ask the questions. We had the Governor Romer at that time. What the hell are you guys doing here? You contaminated Denver? But Governor, you know, it's nothing. Yeah, but politics and science really don't mix. So I was on the scientific end, and other people were on the political end. It was kind of hard to explain since I was the manager there. It was up to me to explain what was going on, and you explain to people who don't know anything about what we were doing. It's kind of hard to do sometimes. Anyway, everything worked out.
You were the manager when all this was
going
on. Was this in, what building was this in?
It was 79.
79.
We called it 79 in those days. Yeah. In fact, 79 building was the first building they tore down. It broke my heart. They wanted me to say a few words, you know, when they were about ready to tear it down. I said, I can't do that. I spent 20 years in that building, and I just couldn't do it. So they got somebody else.
Can you describe what 79 was like?
79 was a research and development building. They did all kinds of research, like in metallurgy, in hydride operations, in pyrochemistry, in spectrophotometer, electron microscopy, strictly research, trying to make better nuclear triggers, make them safer, and to make them operational, make them go off when they're supposed to go off. And so it was a research and development facility, and I was building manager there, and also in charge of a department called pyrochemistry and pyrochemical operations and hydride operations. But they had that was a real good building. We had a lot of smart people there, really smart.
And so it wasn't. It would be fair to say that it wasn't part of production. Then it was just.
No, it wasn't. No, it was an asset to production. Production would come to us and say, "This thing don't work. What can I do?" So then the R&D people would start working on it to make it work. Yeah, whole production was number one there, and R&D was an asset to production.
I see.
Yeah, production was in 771 and 707, 776. But they would come to us all the time. Hey, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. How come?
What did the building look like? Was it where was it in the complex, and what did it look like?
It was right in the middle of the complex. In fact, it was adjacent to 707. That's the biggest building on the plant site. And it was right next to the library because, you know, all those R&D type has to have ready access to the library. And it was right across the street. Yeah,
Was it? It was above ground, wasn't it?
oh yeah, above ground.
I
yeah.
know that some of the buildings were at least partly below ground.
Yeah, 771 was in a hole. But 771 was the most dangerous building in the world. Have you heard that before?
I have heard that before, yeah.
And looking back, I can see why.
You believe that then?
Oh yeah, I do now. I didn't when I was working in there. 771 was a real good building to work in. I mean, the people, I can't believe it. Even the elderly people were really cooperative most of the time. Really, there was really teamwork out there in those days. There's none of this backbiting and that you see in this industry today. But people, they asked me, "Did you enjoy it?" Well, I enjoyed it as much as anybody enjoys their job. Yeah. In fact, it was kind of hard to leave, kind of hard to retire.
And what were the circumstances of your retirement? Did you just decide it was time, or did they?
No, in fact, they wanted to keep me on. They said, I retired when I was 63. They said, "Come on, Bob, you got 2 more years." I said, "No, it's time to retire." And it was.
Of course, you had seen a lot of changes in contractors. And
Oh, yeah. First there was Dow Chemical. They were the best. Maybe I should be saying this.
Lots of people have said that.
Yeah, Dow Chemical was the best, and then came Rockwell International. They were pretty good, but the worst was EG&G. In fact, when I retired, they put EG&G on my retirement papers. I said, "Hey, do me a favor." At the employment place there, I said, put down Rockwell International. I want to retire under Rockwell International, not EG&G. And they did. But Kaiser Hill, I never did work for them. But I collect a good pension from them. That's one thing. But we have there's a newspaper called it's called the out there.
The Homesteaders?
Yeah, the Homesteaders, called the Homesteaders. We get it every month, and the first thing I go to is the obituaries, and there's a lot of people I know,
Yeah.
2 or 3 almost every month. Well, I'm at that age too.
Yeah.
But it's a shock because you know these guys real well and you worked with them for years and you kind of hate to see it, but you know, that's life. Or the end of it.
Now, when you first got there, you say you worked in '81, and then when was 779 built? Was it one of the early ones?
No, that was one of the later ones. Yeah, 81, and then I think 71 was first. Yeah, then 81.
And you worked in '81 first?
Yeah,
before.
yeah. Then I went to 71.
Oh.
And then in 1969, they had that big fire.
Yeah.
In 71. And they needed, and I was there at the time. Yeah, it was Mother's Day, 1969. And they said, hey, we need a building manager in 779. You want to go up there as building manager? I said, sure, boy. I wanted to get out of that because that was one big mess.
What was that '69 fire like for you?
Oh, that was horrible. Really bad for everybody because the fire was so intense and so hot that it had those big glove boxes just melt, just like butter, just melt. But not only that, but all those glove boxes contained plutonium and or uranium, which was highly radioactive. And everybody held their breath because if it breached the ceiling, everything would go east. Broomfield would be wiped out, Denver. But there's a lot of heroes in that particular fire. The firemen, boy, they exposed themselves in a bad way to contain the fire and prevent it from breaching the ceiling. And nobody knows that. Nobody knows that.
Could you tell at the time? I mean, were you and others were very worried right at the time?
Oh, you bet. You bet. Because, you know, like plutonium, the plutonium half-life, it's the most toxic thing on this planet, plutonium metal, plutonium oxide. And the half-life of plutonium is like 26,000 years. So if you get some in your lungs or bones, you'll have to wait 26,000 years in order for half of it to disappear. In fact, I got some in my lungs now, but it's so minute that I'll die of old age first. But yeah, that was really hectic. Those firemen and volunteers and people that had to decontaminate that building afterwards in suits, air supplied suits. It was fantastic. But who knows that? Nobody. Who appreciates it? Nobody.
If you were, you know, telling the story of it now, you know, what do you think is the, you know, like if someone were making a movie of it, what do you think was the most tense time? I mean, just the whole time, or is there one particular?
You know what I relate that time period to? You ever see that movie called it was a true movie about Kerr McGee. What was it called? I can't remember what it was called, but it was a story about...
Oh, about the woman...
yeah.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
I've always...
That's the one. Yeah. Yeah.
Karen Silkwood?
Yeah, Silkwood. It's called Silkwood. Yeah. It was something like that. See, the whole place got contaminated, and nobody would believe him.
Now, you were there when the 57 fire broke out also, right?
1957?
Uh-huh. Wasn't that kind of a major fire?
Can't remember that one.
But so, to your minds, the 69 fire...
Oh, the 69 fire, he'll go down in history as almost the end of Colorado. Because it's like I'm not sure if you know what plutonium oxide looks like, but it's a real fine powder, real fine brown powder, really fine. And once it gets in the atmosphere, you know, just a slight current will just pick it up. And in fact, there was a book written similar to something like that. It was called On the Beach. Remember On the Beach?
I've heard
When they had this nuclear explosion somewhere, and all this plutonium oxide got into the prevailing winds and circled the earth and killed everybody except Australia, whose people had to go on the beach to be protected a little bit. But while on the beach, they were told to give their kids this poison pill so that they would die first, because if the parent would die first, then the kid would suffer needlessly. And that was the end of this planet.
And did you have that kind of thought during the fire? I mean, did it feel like that was almost a potential?
It sure did, because my kids live in Broomfield to start with. And that's where the wind would blow all the time. Yeah, that fire is, somebody ought to make a movie of the fire. Just the fire. And all those brave people that...
Now, I have been told that they used water on the fire, even though that wasn't supposed to be a good idea.
That's all they had.
But in this case, it did help. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the only thing they had. That's the only thing. Yeah, that's the type of fire you don't use water, but in the amount that was necessary to use on that size of fire, that's the only thing they had. That's why those firemen, they put themselves on the line. They really did. In fact, a lot of them had to go to Los Alamos to go through a process where they removed the plutonium from their lungs. It was called EDTA, ethylene diamine tetracetic acid, is a chelating agent that flushed out the lungs and carried the plutonium out. Some made it, some didn't.
Do you know what has happened to those firemen?
No, I lost track. Some died. But they showed us the real movies of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the real ones. And man, that's made us, more determined not to let Russia ever explode one of those things in this country. Oh, that was horrible.
Did they show you that? Was that part of the training, or at what point did you see those movies?
Oh God, I don't know. It was part of trying to instill in us that what we're doing is very important work, and that was the reason.
So that was early on. It was part of your training then.
Oh yeah, because I guess they dropped the bomb in '45. Yeah, that was part of the training, to say, hey, give your best, because this is what we want to prevent. And we did. Yeah, but it was, even though there was a lot of pressure out there, if it wasn't for the teamwork, it would be an awful place. But, everybody worked as a team. Even, like I say, the union is, by nature, very hard to get along with. But most of the time they weren't. Because they're human beings too, and they know.
Yeah.
They know what this country was up against.
So did you personally deal with union people much?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Most of my group were union people. Nice guys. I know one electronic union guy, he'd walk by the lab and stick his head in the door and he'd say, "Hey Bob, you need anything done today?" That's unheard of today. It is. I mean, I don't know personally, but from what I can hear from my kids and other people, there's no cooperation. Too bad. I mean, it's too bad.
Now, are you of Italian background?
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of Italian, people of Italian background at Rocky Flats.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them are in the Union. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, most of them, yeah, they lived in Louisville.
Yes.
Yeah, I knew a lot of them. Busoni and DiCarlo and, old Gino DiCarlo, boy, he was manager of health physics, and I was building manager of 779, and he used to come there and says, "Hey, DeGrazio, how come this radiation level went up the other day?" Okay, Gino, okay, I can explain. But you know what I really hated? I mean, I really disliked, and I'll tell you, and I'll tell this camera, is the plant manager later on. His name was Dominic Sanchini. He was Italian too, and he was the meanest son of a gun I've ever met. I told Stella, I says, that guy's going to die of cancer. He's going to bring cancer because he's so mean. And it did. 2 years after I said that, he died of bladder cancer. But I remember he told all the plant building managers he wants everybody there in his office we started at 7:30, 6:45, so he could rip us apart. He was smart. He was a really highly intelligent person. You couldn't snow him at all. And he would embarrass his directors and building managers in front of everybody. Just terrible. Anyway, but there's several bad things, but most of them was good.
Was that under Rockwell or Dow?
No, in the Rockwell. Yeah. Yeah.
Did things change during all the years that you were there? You said there was teamwork. Did that continue until the time that you left?
Pretty much, in my building anyway. Pretty much. But in the early years, 52, first 20 years maybe, that teamwork you couldn't beat it. I mean, you couldn't tell management type people, supervisors, managers from union people.
Uh-huh.
In fact, in the early years they had what they call quality circles. Did you ever hear of that?
I just have heard the term. I don't really know what it means.
Yeah, quality circles is Japan started that. They might still have it, but that's where the manager of a department and all the employees, both salary and union, would get together and solve a problem. And there would be no supervisor. Everybody was equal. And it worked. I mean, I can show you a bunch of stuff here that we accomplished a lot of stuff that way. But it died out for some reason. I know why it died out, because in our culture, everybody wants a leader. They want somebody to be a leader. And the union people were kind of hesitant to be a leader, to put in their. But that's where the best information came from, because those are the guys that did the work. But we had
They would be able to say, hey, why aren't we doing it this way?
Yeah,
make
yeah.
suggestions.
Sure, because they work with it day in and day out. And, I would be in my office, what do I know? And they would come say, hey, Bob, how about this? I said, well, let's talk about it. And our group was called the Hindenburgs, because we worked with hydrogen, and we named it, I got to show you, this is really great. The Hindenburg dirigible, we worked with hydrogen and plutonium, and hydrogen explodes if you look at it, and plutonium hydride explodes when you look at it, and fires all over the place, controlled fires. So we were known as the Hindenburgs. Yeah. But it worked out pretty good. Yeah, I can just see McCormick, he was a union guy, and he really had a lot of good ideas. In fact, I wrote a story. After I retired, I took up writing as a hobby.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I wrote a story about building 779.
Oh. Huh. You still have that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was. I was going to submit it, try to get it published because I was taking this course and we were supposed to write stuff and hand it in, but I never did because it was kind of unclassified stuff. It wasn't classified, but I didn't want people to know what really went on in the building. Yeah, a lot of good memories.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one memory I'll never forget either. Just the FBI.
You were there during the raid.
Yeah. Man, I walked in and said, what the heck's this? A lot of uniformed people that had FBI on their back of their shirts. And I asked one guy, I said, what are you guys doing here? Well, he gave me the dirtiest look I've ever seen. Didn't say a word. And then we were hurriedly called by the plant manager and said, hey, tell your people to cooperate. Give them anything they want. Don't ask questions. If they want any file, give it to them. If they want your damn office, give it to them. And to this day, I really don't know why they raided the place. Can you imagine that? I don't know why. That's how secret it was.
Yeah. There's a lot of stories that float around, but even you all that work there don't really.
I don't know. If we were told, I must have forgotten it because I really don't know. I know they were looking for certain paperwork, certain records. I know that, but why 79?
So did they come throughout the whole plant, or they came into your building and wanted things? Is that right?
No, I think they checked other buildings. Yeah.
My impression had been that they went through all the buildings, but maybe
Could be, yeah. I don't know. I know I was interested in my building, but I think they did other buildings, yeah. They were looking for certain records.
And did you have to turn over a lot of records?
Gave them all. Yeah, they put them in cardboard boxes and took off as classified ones. Classified. Secret.
And did they ever bring them back, or not? Or do you know?
I don't remember. I can't remember what year that was either. Do you?
I think the raid was in 1989.
89?
Yeah.
Really? But the other thing I remember, 79 building, everybody was working, everything was going around nice, and all of a sudden here comes these terrorists. There were terrorists. It was a mock raid, but they were supposed to be terrorists, with a black thing over their faces and machine guns, and they went in each lab and mowed down everybody, and they killed everybody in the building.
Oh. But you knew it was a mock raid?
No, I didn't know it.
Really?
No, it was new to me.
When was that, would you guess?
Oh, God, this was years ago. I don't know. But, man, they had booties on and respirators, and then they went in the labs, and, they didn't shoot anybody, of course, but the report afterwards said everybody in that building was killed, including me.
Oh.
That's scary.
That is.
That brought to life what it could be really like.
But you weren't warned ahead of time that there's
No.
going to be this mock
No.
raid?
Most of the time when we had drills, I'd know, just for safety precautions, because people have to turn off their equipment, and if they don't, then... Yeah, in fact, soon after that, they put barbed wire on top of all the buildings, because supposedly these terrorists were to parachute down and enter that way.
Was that very frightening to you?
Sure was. Yeah, oh my God. It's a guy with a machine gun pointing it at me. But they came in fast and they left fast. They didn't loiter. But there was enough of them so that they went almost in every room. In one door and out the other. You see that on TV. That sort of brings back that memory.
Do you think that was like in the 80s? Was that later?
I don't know. Yeah, it's got to be, let's see. Yeah, it's got to be in the early 80s, I would say. Yeah. Then we had a great time talking about it. Well, where did you get shot, you know? Well, I got it right here in the chest. Well, why they blew my head off afterwards, you know, just to let off steam. But you can't say that. You know, I'd come home and want to tell her, but why?
What was it like for you when the protesters, first had their big demonstration and then later on? What was that like for you?
I didn't mind, because I knew they didn't know really what was going on, and if they were afraid of their family and kids, you know, that they don't know what this awful place was doing, I don't blame them. In fact, I felt sorry for those nuns.
Can you describe? I've heard the story of the nuns, but I never really understood it.
Well, they were
got onto the plant site.
Yeah, I don't know how, but they got through. They sure did. There was a security breach.
Were they dressed like nuns?
Yeah, blue nuns, blue garb and everything. I think there was 3 or 4. But they came in to pray for us. Pray for our souls, our wicked souls. Yeah. But you know.
Did they come into your building?
Oh, no, they just
on the grounds?
Oh, they just barely got past the main gate and they were picked up. Yeah. But some of those guys were really dangerous, the protesters. Most were harmless people. But some were. But the guards out there knew who they were and kept a good eye on them. Yeah. Yeah,
Did you get angry with the protesters, or?
No, I didn't. Not really. Except the kooks. I mean, the dangerous ones, you know, they'd just as soon come in and throw a bomb than not. But the others were just looking for information. How are you guys going to affect my family? Is it safe to drink the water? Is the air safe to breathe? You know, you're going to have a big explosion out there and wipe out Broomfield or Denver? I'd do the same thing.
Do you think there was anything helpful about the protests?
Helpful?
I mean, in terms of helping the public understand more?
Right off the top of my head, I'd say no, because they never got any information. Nothing. That I know of. You know, there's always few people that likes to talk. In fact, one guy talked, an ex-worker, I think he was in Chicago when he talked about the thickness of the walls out there. Man, he was picked up so quick. He was telling the thickness of the walls of 71 building, and they got him. In fact, I know several people that went to meetings, public meetings that they shouldn't have gone to, and they were picked up because these meetings were held by shady type people.
You mean workers would go to the meetings?
Yeah.
Nice.
In fact, I went to one myself.
Mm-hmm.
But it was on the FBI list that they're, I don't know what they call them, at the security risk type meetings. They could be just ordinary meetings held for the public.
And you weren't supposed to go then? Oh, I see.
How would we know? They could be talking about city problems or anything. Building a tennis court somewhere, who knows? But security was really, really good in those days. They should have kept the same type of security at airports today that they had then. In order to get to my building, we had to go through, we had to go 1, 2, 3, 4 checkpoints where guards checked your badge and checked you.
And did you have to have just one kind of badge or several?
Well, it's one kind of badge with different markings on it, like 771 and 79 and 559. The name of the buildings that you're allowed to go in.
So you couldn't go into other buildings?
Not unless you got special permission. In fact, the story that I wrote, I wish you'd take it with you and read it in your spare time.
I would love to.
This one guy, see, whenever you came into a building as a visitor, you'd have to sign in. And this is a true story, except the end. This particular guy didn't sign in, and we had a drill, a building evacuation drill. I knew it was a drill, but nobody else did. And everybody was accounted for, except this one guy. And one of the guy's managers, he said, "What happened to so and so?" I says, "I don't know. He's not signed in." He said, "Well, he came to our lab, and I don't know what happened to him." So that set a whole new thing into process. We had to find that guy. So that meant that the health physics people had to go into a supposedly contaminated building to look for him, which jeopardized the health physics people. They could have gotten contaminated. I mean, really bad if it was a real thing.
Yeah.
And but they had no choice. John Doe was missing. 100 other guys were accounted for. John Doe wasn't there. So I had to call in the shift superintendent and the health physics manager, and I said, "We got to look for this guy." So then things were turned over to him, to the shift superintendent.
And did you find him? Did they find him?
He just left without signing in. But those drills are supposed to be serious, and a lot of guys didn't take them seriously. A lot of guys, afterwards, we had to go in, and some guy was in the bathroom, another guy was taking a shower, another guy says, "I can't leave my equipment," and on. Because when you have a gamma alarm, you're dead unless you leave promptly and in the right direction.
Because the
Gamma rays fry you. Alpha particles, that's just surface contamination unless you breathe them in. But the gamma and neutron, you're dead on the doornail. I've been there a lot of years, and I was in my lab one time, and the gamma alarm went off, and boy, all three of us, was three there, got rattled. We went through the lab, out the door, down the hall, which we shouldn't have done, because there was a door right behind us. 2 feet away, there was a door that we could have gone through.
But you should have done.
But you get rattled, yeah. You get rattled. Even I got rattled. Because again, Nagasaki and Hiroshima tells you what gamma rays do to you, and neutron rays. Terrible. Skin, just like leprosy, just drops off. Your eyeballs fall. But I enjoyed it. Really. I'd come home half dead sometimes, because of the stress but it's not the same type of stress my kids have today in their jobs.
Did you feel as though you were doing something important?
You bet. Oh, that's what the teamwork was all about. We knew we were. There was no doubt about it, because we see movies and lectures all the time about what the other countries are doing. And that's where the escalation came in. Yeah, Russia'd have something like this, and well, the United States is down here, so we'd have better do something to bring them back up, so that we're as bad or good as Russia. Now there's China and Iran, Iraq and Syria, Lebanon, and Russia's on our side. What a twist, huh? Korea.
What does that make you think now? I mean, does it? Do you look back on this and still feel that we needed to make as many weapons as we did?
I don't know. You know, one weapon today, the magnitude of one weapon today would wipe out the contamination from one weapon. Would take care of everything. Really, would take care of. The weapons today are a lot, if you want to, the weapons today would make Hiroshima type weapons like a firecracker. That's what's really disturbing. And they're so easy to bring over. You know, you can carry a megaton weapon, or almost that, in a suitcase. Before, they used to be monstrous things. So that, you know, if Korea or Iran and Korea are really, really bad, now Pakistan and India have nuclear weapons. So if one country really goes bad, that president of North Korea is a psycho. Well, you probably know this. He's insane, and he can do anything. That thing's flashing.
Right. Oh, I need to change the tape. Let's just stop then for a minute. This is a continuation of the oral history with Bob DeGrazio, and we were just can't remember exactly what we were talking about. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, as I understand it, in perhaps the 80s, early 80s or so, there were changes in the workforce, in the sense that women and minorities, there were more of a focus of getting those people in the production areas and maybe labs. Did that have any impact on you and your work as a...
No, not a bit. In fact, I try to get my daughter out there to work in as a chemical operator, but for some reason she wasn't hired. Kathy. Mm-hmm. And I was really discouraged, disappointed, because I went up to the people who were hired. I said, "How come you didn't hire Kathy?" They said, "Oh, we reached our limits," and that was that. But no, the women worked out fine in production. But there was always that thing in the back of my head, was that, you know, if they're childbearing age, they shouldn't be working in a radiation department, lab. A lot of them did. And I think that they had to say they weren't pregnant, or they weren't planning on being pregnant. But if they were, then they'd have to get out of there right away. Yeah. But otherwise, they worked just as well as the men. Had no problem.
Mm-hmm. So as a manager, were there any particular problems over the course of the years that you had to struggle with?
Oh, there's always office space problems. There's always help problems. I'm always trying to get more help and more office space and more equipment. Those were the big problems.
Did you actually do much work in the labs, or was it mainly, your work was mainly...
Well, when I first started out, the first 20 years was in the lab. I liked that. I really did. I remember working on a problem for 3 years. We were trying to make a primary standard for plutonium, and the compound that we were working on was called dicesium plutonium hexachloride, CS2P, I see it in my dreams, CS2PuCl6. And we wanted the National Bureau of Standards at that time accept it as a primary standard for plutonium. You know, the primary standard is that you can get this and standardize your equipment with it. But it had one molecule of moisture in it, and they wouldn't accept it. One molecule of H2O. One. And they wouldn't accept it. For 3 years, my boss at that time was friend John Miner. He's another guy that should be interviewed. I mean, really.
I interviewed him.
Oh, you did?
Some years ago, actually.
Really? Some years ago? For this?
Yes.
Really? God, I was going to call him up today and say, hey, friend John, you better sign up. Yeah, he was my boss for a lot of years. Real nice guy. Oh, you probably remember. Yeah. In fact, I'm supposed to call him today. Yeah, anyway, he and I worked on it for 3 years, and finally we settled for secondary insurance, not primary, but secondary. And NBS accepted that. But that was, boy, day and night I was in the lab titrating, you know, 8 hours a day, every day for 3 years, trying to figure out how we can get that, what's called 1 mole, 1 mole of moisture out of there.
And it never...
Never did.
Interesting.
But for a secondary standard, it was okay. It had to be.
And can you explain the difference between a secondary standard and a primary?
Well, a primary standard is 100% correct. If you say the primary standard has X grams of plutonium in it, that's it. You can rely on it. Secondary might be plus or minus a half a gram off. But if you know that, you can still use it. So we had all kinds of instrumentations there to calibrate and standardize. A lot of them. A lot of gas chromatographs and infrared and the spectrometers and gravimetric titration and all kinds of stuff.
And all of that equipment came from elsewhere, right? It wasn't...
Oh no, we had to buy it. We had to buy it.
Yeah.
Had to purchase it from vendors. In fact...
Is that part of your job?
Oh yeah. Yeah, these vendors would come and try to sell their wares to us, you know. They come from all over the country and overseas to sell us. One guy, I remember, he wanted to sell us, not me in particular, but he wanted to sell the company a multi-million-dollar electron microscope that went in my building. And well, I remember.
Did he succeed?
Yeah, he succeeded. The thing came in and all kinds of stuff went wrong with it. Just couldn't get it to operate. And the guy came over and worked on it and worked on it. And I guess finally worked, I don't know. But that, in those days, we had more money to spend than we really needed. I remember Vavoto used to come in and says, "Hey Bob, you got $50,000 to spend." Sorry, I don't need anything. Well, maybe I shouldn't be saying this. If you don't buy it now, next year it's going to be cut from your budget. So we got another piece of equipment. Usually a gas chromatograph. I had a dozen of them.
And what is that?
Oh, gas chromatograph?
Yeah.
Well, that's one of those things that you can get a gas, any gas, put it in the gas chromatograph and it'll break it down into its components, find out what's in it. In fact, I wanted to find out what cigarette smoke was like. And we put it in the gas chromatograph and there's 24 peaks, meaning each peak was a different element, a different gas. And there was they were called ketones and aldehydes and tars and all kinds of weird stuff in smoke. Dangerous stuff. Alcohols, stuff that'll burn your lungs out. But you can get an unknown gas and put it in the gas chromatograph, and it'll break it down into its component parts.
That is a gas chromatic. I'm not sure.
It's two words,
Two words.
GAS, and then chromatograph.
Okay, I understand. As people on the outside learned more about what was going on at Rocky Flats, some people felt very worried about safety, in terms of the environment and also for the workers. How did you feel about that as someone who was on the inside?
Well, I knew that we were working with dangerous stuff, but I also knew that all the safeguards were in place, and all the safeguards were talked about all the time. We talked about following procedures. We talked about the what ifs. What if this happened? What if that happened? How are you going to take care of it so that the environment is safe? That was our primary requisite, actually. Protect the environment. You might get the building all messed up, but protect the environment. That was number one. And we did. And we did. That's what I mean by teamwork. I don't care who they were, managers and union people, minorities, you name it. That was number one. And that was harped on every month in safety meetings every month, building committee meetings all the time, movies, tests, over and over.
And even when there was a lot of pressure for production, did you ever feel that the pressure for production?
I wasn't in productions.
So you were kind of apart.
Yeah, no, we weren't. We assisted production. We felt their pressure, tried to help them the best we can. But the number of parts that went out the door was somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
But we helped them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that.
Did you work directly? You did have some work directly with plutonium, did you not?
For 20 years.
Yeah, that's what.
Oh yeah, plutonium, uranium, neptunium, americium, thorium, all radioactive stuff. But americium was the worst as far as radiation is concerned.
Can you describe, I know americium, can you just describe what americium is?
It's a byproduct of plutonium. Plutonium-242 or 241 will decay into americium-241, which was more radioactive than the plutonium itself. It's a decay product. So when you worked with americium, you worked only for a few minutes in the gloves and then left.
And with a lot of those products, you have to be suited up.
We have to, oh yeah, well, you had to wear coveralls. We call them coveralls. No street clothing. Just like that movie,
Silkwood?
Silkwood, yeah. You saw, did you see it?
I didn't see it. I'm going
Well, they
to
had
see it.
coveralls on, and they worked, in the glove boxes through rubber gloves, lead-lined rubber gloves, which were, they call them 30 mil, heavy as heck. By the time you got through, your arms ached, your shoulders ached. Well, because lead would absorb most of the radiation, but not all. So that's why you were limited.
Now, you said a while ago that you have some, I think it's called body burden, is that
Yeah.
right? How did you find that out?
Oh, they have a very sophisticated radiation counter out there. It's a real sensitive counter encased in lead, so all the normal outside radiation can't get in. Normal radiation.
Like from the sun?
Yeah, from the sun and from the dirt itself, And we found out that this minute was 1/10 of a microgram, which is You have to have a microscope to see it. But the radiation counter, body counter, picked it up. I'd like to go there because you'd lay down in this comfortable chair for about an hour, you know, and you'd go to sleep, or you couldn't move too much, but it was comfortable. I always look forward to it.
Oh.
Unless a person had claustrophobia, then that would be bad.
So you sat down rather than laying down?
Well, it's like this recliner, and they put two detectors right here over the lungs. And the radiation would slowly seep out as it be picked up and measured.
I see. And did they do that routinely?
Oh, yeah.
You worked with,
Oh yeah.
like how, once a year or something?
No, I can't remember. It was more often than that. It all depends what area you worked in. If you worked in a highly contaminated area, it would be sooner.
And did you have you talked about your experience in being contaminated with tritium. Did you have experiences in being contaminated with plutonium or?
Oh yeah, plutonium. Surface contamination, not internal.
Right.
That's why anybody that worked in the laboratory, plutonium laboratory, had to wear booties and the coveralls, and then take a shower before they left the building. So every night we took a shower before we went home.
And then left all the clothes there and put on your regular.
Oh yeah. Left the coveralls and underwear and everything else in a big basket that they treated separately in the laundry. All that water was not sent out the plant site at all.
What did they do with that water?
Well, it all depends if it was contaminated or the level of contamination. Before they discharged it, all the contamination was gone. It was removed by various chemical processes. That was the purpose of the big laundry room.
Now it sounds like your work was mainly in 81 and 79 and one other building?
71.
71, right. Yeah. And you went to 79 after 71.
Yeah. Yeah, 81 was just the first it was a garage, a tin garage.
Ah.
I could still see the walls going like this when it blew. And then 81 was finally finished. 81 was not a plutonium building. It was uranium. And then 71. And then 79.
What was your favorite?
79. Oh yeah, that was really interesting to see all the research and development going on. Boy, it was really great to see something work out. You know, you could try something 100 times and not work, and then bingo, it worked. Not in my group, but all the groups in 79. You work, and failure after failure, and then all of a sudden, wow, there it is. Most of the time,
So
not all the time.
So it was exciting.
Really was. Really was. Those guys were dedicated. Yeah, we and then as people that retired, a lot of them worked as consultants for the various contractors out there, and I stayed on 9 months, I think it was, for LADA. And one of my jobs was with LADA was to be sure that the contractor employees were safe in the buildings that they worked in. So every morning we had a meeting with the contractor supervisors and managers in the big cafeteria in 750 building. And the only way that I could get those guys to come and get the latest scoop of what to look out for in the various buildings was to have coffee and donuts. Lots of donuts. I mean, they would come for that. Otherwise, forget it. And the company paid for it. So the little donuts became real big rolls like this, and you should see those guys. Man, they have 2 or 3 of the big ones, and gallons of coffee seemed like but at least I could tell them what to look out for. If a certain room was contaminated or...
Was this starting to clean up at that point or not?
No, no. No, this was in I retired in 1990. This was like 1991. No cleanup.
Now, after you were there when production was stopped relating to the FBI raid, was that a big thing for you in your work, or
Mm-mm.
it didn't have that much
No.
impact?
No. The R&D is one of those things that goes on forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sure affected 707 building, 76, 77. That was 1989. Was it?
Yeah, that was the FBI raid, and as I understand it, they kind of shut down
Yeah.
all the processes.
Yeah. No, 1989 is when they stopped making the triggers.
Mhm.
You tell me about the FBI raid. I don't know.
There's a lot of different stories about it.
Name one.
Well, the one that I have heard discussed is that the FBI came in because they had been told that there was incineration, there was a burning, incinerating in one of the buildings that it was supposed to be not burning.
Oh,
And that they had a
yeah.
flyover or something.
Oh, yeah. This plane saw a thermal spot on some kind of instrument. Yeah. I remember. Yeah. That was so incidental that I forgot it. Yeah.
But it sounds like you weren't directly questioned by the FBI. You just gave them stuff.
No.
Did that have anything to do with your decision to retire?
Oh, no.
No.
No, it was time. I knew it was time. I just felt it was time. And it was. I never regretted it.
When you look back now, what do you think was the best thing or best things about working at Rocky Flats?
The people. No doubt about it. Never had... Well, the only way I can compare it is in today's world. In today's world, the company doesn't care about you. If you want to leave, fine. If you don't like a job, quit. There, they wanted you to stay. They wanted you to stay because we had experience. We were an asset. We knew what we were doing. And they wanted like I said, it wasn't all bed and roses. Don't get me wrong, but it's a heck of a lot better. Would you want something to drink?
No, I'm fine.
It was a lot better than today's workforce. That's, the hard part was I'll tell you what the hard part was. Lots of times, as building manager, you're responsible for everything that goes on. no matter what, your fault or not. So lots of times I had to get up out of a warm bed, middle of winter, 10 below zero outside, to drive to the plant because something went wrong, and the manager or supervisor didn't want to take responsibility to do something. So I had to go out there, and so I got the utility manager, and I said, okay, let's go over that. You tell me what's wrong, because I don't know. He's the manager of the utility department. You know what that means? That means that all the glove boxes are inerted with nitrogen or argon. And if one of the glove boxes is compromised, which means if air got in there, you'd have a big fire. So the utility, the ventilation, has to be pretty damn accurate, and then the backup has to be okay, and the backup has to be okay. So he said, one time he said, this is what we have to do. I says, fine, do it. But I had to sign off, and he'd do it. And that's where the cooperation comes in again. They didn't say, oh, you're building manager, you do it. I mean, you take responsibility. He took responsibilities with my okay. And without that sort of teamwork, it would have been a different story I'd be telling you.
So you think without that kind of teamwork, it might have been a more dangerous place?
No doubt. There were a few people that didn't follow rules and regulations, and nothing but bad stuff came out of it. You want to hear a good one? I'll tell you a good one. This is all coming back now. When EG&G took over, the first thing they did was bring in retired admirals, captains of a nuclear sub, admirals of a aircraft carrier as top management. And they weren't used to taking orders. They weren't used to taking advice from anybody else. Their orders went from them to you. And they wouldn't listen to us. They wouldn't listen to the guys on the floor. They say, you do it that way. Can't do it that way. It's not right. You do it. I remember one guy, he was a captain. Yeah, full captain. I think that's a bird eagle in the Army. He went down 71 building to pep talk the troops, which were mostly Union people. And he thought all the information was going to go from him to them. But you don't talk one way with Union people. They'll talk back. And they did. And he was so frustrated and so surprised that he went to the plant manager and says, did you know that those guys actually talked back to me? But that was the mentality with EG&G. And nobody appreciated that. There was another guy, all he could think about was jogging down the road there to keep in shape. A captain of a U-boat. Can you imagine that? But anyway, that's part of the experience.
So you were describing some of the best things, being the people, and then my next question was going to be, what were the worst things? And I think you kind of told me getting up in the middle of the night. But
Yeah.
Any other things that were the worst things about working there?
Well, I don't know. What? Well, it goes without saying, all millions of meetings all the time. See, yeah. I don't know. It was a good job. One thing I didn't like when we lived in Longmont, that was a long way to drive. So we finally moved to Boulder. That made it easier.
Yeah.
I didn't like carpools too well either. So I finally got out of carpools.
So after you moved here, you didn't go with the carpool then?
Not so much. The guy across the street, I went with him. But carpools, there's always somebody that's late, or I finally figured out that my carpool wasn't for me. So I drove my own car. Well, Sanchini, plant manager was Dominic Sanchini. He wanted early morning meeting with him before we went to our buildings. So I had to drive myself. And then there was always had to stay late for some reason or another. Not all the time, but lots of times. So carpool just didn't work out.
Now, when were you promoted? You had a lot of promotions then. You started out working in the labs and then became plant. What was the progression of your promotion?
Oh God. 1952, started like a chemist. And you'll have to ask for Boulder. I don't know, chemist, and then I can show you. I got it written down. I can't remember, chemist, and analytical chemist, and senior chemist, building manager, I don't know.
So basically you moved from chemist to building manager.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that I haven't asked you about that you think might be important for people, 50 years from now to know? Or even people now?
Well, the bottom line.
Why they show them the picture downstairs, you said, bye.
Yeah, I'll show her when we finished here. The bottom line, Rocky Flats was a necessary entity. It had to be there. And other plants like Rocky Flats, Hanford, and Los Alamos, they had to be there to defend this country. And there's a lot of people that give their lives to it, really, literally. Because there's a lot of people that got sick working with that stuff until they found out more about atomic energy. And the bottom line is that when the need arrived, people were there. Americans were there. And if you're lucky enough to work with a lot of good people, then it makes life easier. Yeah.
Well, that might be a good place to stop. Is that
Okay.
sense to you?